I think you will. An applause. So, I would like you, Fur Hat, to now please introduce the panel that is going to have a witty, intelligent, and funny conversation this evening.
I will be delighted.
Please.
Firstly, I'm very proud to introduce to you Michael Hagstrom from the United States of America. He is one of the big shots at the SAS Institute at Cary, North Carolina. I am proud to tell you that SAS Institute has some very, very smart robotic applications.
Well, Fur Hat is guys like you that make it possible for us to deal with big data. Maybe, let me put it this way, we live through guys like you.
Great. Please take your seat, Professor. Next in line is Professor Alpha Miller. Come up, sir, so I can take a look at you. Arthur is a professor of history, science and philosophy at the London University College. Smart guy. Writes great books.
He is high on creativity.
Speaking to the microphone.
I spent some days at the London Science Museum. Great fun with the kids, but they told me I am too young to get stuffed up in there. Take your seat, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, I call on the Right Honourable Peter Norman. He is Minister of about just everything in the Swedish government. Especially, he keeps an eye on the financial markets.
And I can tell you, Fur Hat, that's a hell of a job. And maybe I need some of your intelligence and your help.
What bonus do you offer? Let's negotiate this later. Please take your seat.
Thank you.
Now to our fourth panelist, Dr. Maria Stromer. She is a professor of nanotechnology at the Uppsala University. Maria comes from the Arctic, from the beautiful Lofoten in Norway.
That's right. I really like your fur hat. It kind of reminds me of Lofoten, of the fishermen that went out cod fishing. Maybe I should invite you to go cod fishing with me. March is really the best season.
Sorry, I always become seasick, and I have to tell you, I'm a bit afraid of you. You might turn me into a nanobot. But please take your seat.
Thank you.
I now call on Adam Hochschild, a man for all seasons. Writer, historian, storyteller, globetrotter, and of course professor. He is on the faculty of the Graduate School of Journalism at UC Berkeley. Adam, your last book was To End a Wars. Have you?
Well, I'm working on it, Fur Hat. Give me a little time.
Well, sure you will get a few opportunities later. Please take your seat.
Well done. Haven't you forgotten someone?
Of course, Nora Bateson, the maker of the film Art and Ecology of Minder. We saw that great film this morning. Please take your seat.
Yeah, Nora will be... I will be the co-moderator to Nora tonight.
Okay, I think we should start with you, Arthur. You've spent your life pursuing the question, what is creativity? In your book on Einstein and Picasso, you have this beautiful subtitle of Space, Time, and the Beauty that Creates Havoc. You help us imagine a world as it was perceived before Einstein and Picasso made their breakthroughs, before they created their havoc. And you show us how they revealed previously never imagined realities. How did they do that?
Well, Nora, that's a very interesting question, and in order for me to answer it in some fullness, let me tell everybody some creativity stories, I should say. First of all, imagine a world in which everyone believes that the only thing that's real is something that can be seen or perceived, nothing else. So in this world, scientists don't believe in atoms because they cannot be directly perceived, and artists focus on representing the world about them. In other words, they focus on figuration. This was the world in which Einstein and Picasso grew up in. But by the turn of the 20th century, classical, intuitive ways of understanding space and time were being questioned. And that was due in no small part to the discovery of X-rays, which laid bare an unseen world, and also the invention of cinematography and telephones, which altered everyone's conception of space and time. But the problem was how to proceed. And in 1905, Albert Einstein, an obscure patent clerk living in the intellectual backwater of Bern, Switzerland, realized the way forward in science. He concluded that he had no quarrel with the equations of physics themselves, but rather, as he put it in the very first line of the relativity paper, the way in which scientists interpreted them, which led to asymmetries which were not inherent in nature. And using a minimalist aesthetic, he pared away inessential notions and redundant explanations and laid bare a world beyond sense perceptions, a world in which there are atoms and in which your time is not the same as mine. In other words, there's a relativity of time. This came to be known as the theory of relativity, and it was a response to Einstein's aesthetic discontents. 2 years later, Pablo Picasso, a struggling artist, realized that recent developments in science, technology, and mathematics held the key to a dramatically new way to represent nature, a way based on an aesthetic that reduced forms to geometry. And the product of Picasso's thought in 1907 was his masterpiece, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, in which one of the demoiselles is a projection from the fourth dimension. Now, as is too often the case, Einstein's and Picasso's creative products were given a negative response. After all, how can time be relative? That's nonsense. And it wreaked havoc as well. And to add to all this, Einstein's relativity theory was in conflict with empirical data. And Einstein's response to this situation was simple and direct: the data were wrong. And they turned out to be wrong. In Einstein's opinion, his theory of relativity was too beautiful to be incorrect. As for Picasso, well, his colleagues thought he had lost his mind, and his colleagues' reaction was one of embarrassed silence. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon was scandalous. Critics panned it. After all, it wreaked havoc with everyone's sensibilities, both perceptual and aesthetic. Only Picasso knew its worth. Einstein and Picasso, between them, we may say, pretty much invented the 20th century. But we must bear in mind that in order for them to do it, Picasso had to think like a scientist and Einstein like an artist. At that nascent moment of discovery, the boundary blurs between art and science. Now, Einstein introduced aesthetics into 20th century science as a research guideline, and Picasso introduced science-influenced art as another way to probe nature. But where did this all lead to? I mean, can there be an art-influenced science? Can there be a fusion between the two? Now, I'm looking into these questions in a forthcoming book about the parallel development of art and science in the 20th and 21st centuries. Now, developments in relativity theory, quantum theory, electronics, and biotechnology led to an increased interplay between art and science, which kick-started a dramatic new movement which some people call art science. Now, what I believe is that as we move increasingly into a very interdisciplinary 21st century, that art and science will merge to make a third culture. And this third culture will characterize anew what is meant by culture and what is meant by life itself. what will these denizens of the third culture look like? Well, we can imagine them sitting in front of computers with fantastic architectures, maybe even having organic components. What better way to look into consciousness? And they will turn out theories that will spin off images that will be aesthetic and beautiful in the new and yet to be determined meaning of these terms. Let me conclude with a proposal that scientists use modes of research that emphasize more aesthetics than too much dependence on empirical data, and perhaps that's a good hint for advances in humanistic endeavors as well. Let me conclude with and let me say one other thing, that the boundaries between art and science, between art, science, and technology is increasingly blurring. And who even 30 years ago would have expected this? So let me conclude with a quote from William Blake, who wrote that what is proven today was yesterday only imagined. And Einstein and Picasso knew that only too well. Thank you.
Thank you. Nora and I have asked our distinguished panelists to open up their conversation with a 5-minute sort of introduction. Your company, Michael, would not have been possible without the breakthroughs of Einstein, of quantum physics, of cybernetics, of which you have educated us today, Nora, and so much that has followed upon that, which was eloquently described and analyzed by Brian Arthur yesterday. Your company, SAS Institute, is on beyond the bleeding edge of development, I would say. Where are you taking us?
Well, I think the point I wanted to share as a backdrop to some short examples I will give of where we are headed is how technology can help us with life-critical systems. And we know all too well the complexity involved. We know all too well that risks are global, interlinked, and that there is a domino effect and a sequence, and that many socio-economic challenges that we're faced, and that we know that we do need a step change, and one of these step changes is going to come from technology. And in technology we are facing effectively 3 trends that are converging at this point in time, one of which you've heard: big data. Big data partly is a trend word. We got tired of talking about cloud last year, so we came up with a new term. But more importantly, 90% of the world's data is produced the last 2 years. So any data strategy that's 2 years old or older is effectively outdated. And many organizations and public institutions work with internal data. They do not look at the wealth of external data. And that's before my colleagues here, Fur Hat, starts to get active. And that links to hyperconnectivity, because the social media created that growth. Hyperconnectivity, when we put on the sensors, are going to accelerate that monfold, 50x more. And even here today, I mean, in this room, we have thousands of sensors, mobile phones. We can follow your opinions through social media sites real time.